Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered story behind the Wing Chun episode of Fight Quest. Lots of gems, lots of nonsense, lots of stuff. Let's get to it.
He is unstoppable, unbeatable, unbelievable. He's Alex Richter, the Kung Fu Genius.
And every day, I practice martial arts.
Watch out!
Word is, I'm a Kung Fu genius. Practiced all day like a genius.
Hi, I'm the Kung Fu Genius, aka Alex Richter, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a Wing Chun instructor and martial arts fanatic based out of here in New York City. If you're listening to this podcast on audio, definitely would appreciate if you guys write a review or say something nice or give us 5 stars or whatever. And if you guys are watching us on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius and hit that bell for notifications. Like the video, comment, help us get the word out there.
Yes.
And with that, let's get started. All right, so today, Dre, what I want to talk about is actually something, I have talked about this before, and we've definitely had conversations about this.
Yes,
And,
long time ago, long time coming for this update, because
Yeah.
I need to know Fight Quest.
Yes.
What, where, when did this happen? What channel? What? I don't know anything about the Fight Quest.
So Fight Quest was a TV show back in the day, like in the late 2000s, and it was, kind of on that reality TV show craze, and it was a martial arts themed TV show. And
What channel?
I think it was Discovery Channel. And so there were two of them. There was Human Weapon, and I think Human Weapon was on History Channel, and then the other one was Fight Quest. And basically, both of the shows had the format of you had 2 hosts, and they would go to different countries to learn martial arts in the country of origin.
Oh, I think I've seen one episode.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
all right.
so
Some
the
dude went to Shaolin Temple.
Right,
I think I've seen
I think
that.
the Shaolin Temple one, I think that was Human Weapon. I don't know if they did that
Might-
on
okay.
on Fight Quest. They might have. I didn't watch all the episodes. But
right.
anyway, in 2008, they wanted to do an episode on Wing Chun. And so they actually contacted me
smart
first.
guys.
Yeah, they contacted me first.
Smart
And-
idea again.
And I thought it was going to be like the biggest thing. I thought this was going to be like huge in terms of the exposure. And I have and for like the 8 people out there who have followed me through the years, I have talked about this before. I've mentioned it in kind of, drips and drabs on the Dudes of Kung Fu podcast, and also my
Spoke
good
about it recently, yeah.
on the Martial Arts Mania podcast by my
Okay.
friend AJ and Gavin out in LA. I actually talked about it already, but I figured, why don't I? But that was just one part of that podcast. I didn't go into it too deeply.
Drips and drabs,
And
yeah.
and I thought there's kind of a deeper story in there, and I wanted to maybe tell it
In depth.
because I think there are a lot of people that don't know everything that happened. There's some people who really like that episode, that Wing Chun episode. I only, full disclosure, I only watched the full episode once. It was kind of hard to get through knowing what the actual story was and what it was supposed to be and kind of everything that happened. And then there was also a lot of behind the scenes drama that some of that stuff became public and some of it hasn't. And of course, because I was in Sifu Leungting's organization for many
Yeah.
years at that time, even though I had given one interview while I was still in Sifu Leungting's organization, I couldn't tell everything because there were certain things that, I would have been in a little bit of trouble had I
Now,
talked
how
about those things.
far into the association were you? 3 years in?
No. This was 2008. I had already been teaching Wing Chun in New York for 6 years at this
Okay,
point.
yeah.
Right? So I was already a Sifu instructor and all that. So anyway, I really thought when I got contacted by the producers of Fight Quest, because I knew the show was quite popular. I think the Wing Chun episode that we were in, I think that was the final episode of the 2nd season. So it had already played for a season. They had, I think they had gone to Japan to do karate and gone to Brazil for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so they wanted to do a Wing Chun episode. And I thought, wow, the show's really popular. It's a big deal. It's on Discovery Channel. And I really thought that this
Some
would be
exposure.
huge
Yeah, yeah.
exposure, right?
Okay.
Not knowing that this show would end up being far more trouble than it was worth. And not at all live up to the potential, because it had massive, massive potential to be something really great. And so I want to tell a little bit of the backstory. I've told it before, but I figured let me tell it in a little bit more detail so people can kind of get the feeling for it. And before I get started, I just want to say it's been this happened back in 2008. It is now 2021. So it's been a few years since it happened. So like if I don't remember
Like
every single
summer, right?
It was summer. Yeah, if
Yeah.
I don't remember every single exact detail or date or whatever, because, whenever you talk about these things, there's always someone out there who's like, well, actually, that was filmed in August. Maybe I say it was filmed in July or something like that, right? And then they're going to dismiss everything you say because
The actual address was 1496.
Exactly. It was, you shot this in this side of the park or whatever. I mean, it's like, like take it easy, as I always like to say, because sometimes people can get a little lost in that stuff and forget that the main thing is the main thing, the story. So anyway, like I said, there were a few things that even at that time when it came out, I couldn't tell all of these things because, the sensitivity. I was still in Sifu Learning organization at that time. And I left his organization in 2011. And at that time, had already been a few years since Fight Quest at that time. And I just went on and did my own thing. And it's only been, here and again that people kind of ask me about it. And then it'll kind of pop up or whatever. And I feel like, I almost feel like the whole reason why I want to do it on a podcast is so that when people ask me, I don't have to tell the whole story again. I can just be like, just listen to episode 2.
Listen.
And they got the whole thing right there, right? And then so I could just make it like kind of a one and done type thing, right?
You don't got to get that feeling of...
Exactly. And again, like, I didn't want to talk about a lot of things because, there was some sensitivity because I was still in Sifu Learning organization and I was very much
You were the
involved.
man at that time, too.
No, not at all. I wasn't the man at that time. There were many people far more senior than me and far more successful. But in terms of the Fight Quest...
Yeah.
But in terms of the Fight Quest episode, I mean, I was the first point of contact to the producer, and I was the one who brought it to Sifu Learning and helped to arrange some of the stuff. So for this particular thing, I was pretty involved. So, and again, I'm not gonna, it's not for me to bash anyone or whatever. Actually, like, in hindsight, it was kind of funny. The whole thing is very, like, at that time, it was very, it was a bit disheartening, but like, when I go back and think about it, we still ended up having a pretty good time. And I learned a lot about how the entertainment industry works.
Okay.
And,
those much needed learning moments in life.
Yeah. So, things can either be a learning experience or an earning experience. And that was definitely a learning experience, right? So to come back to the format of the show. So you had two hosts on Fight Quest. You had Jimmy Smith, who was an MMA fighter. I think at that time he was still competing. Okay. And then you had another guy's name was Doug Anderson, and I think he was like some tattoo guy from Jersey, kind of a tough guy or whatever, right?
Okay. Gotta love these guys.
Yeah, and they had already done. I mean, so they were already into the second season, so they had already been doing this. So by the time the Wing Chun episode came around, it was like, as far as Fight Quest goes, a real well-oiled machine. And they only did the 2 seasons. So the Wing Chun episode is the last episode of the last season, and that was it. Well, I mean, also, to be fair, I mean, how many different styles are there to go and do this? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to do every variant of karate. You can do every variant of Chinese Kung Fu. So, I mean, it's a show that, went through its entire life cycle, so to speak, right?
Got it.
And so the basic idea is that the two of them would learn a martial art for like 2 or 3 days, and they would learn it in the country of origin from like a master of note. And then on the final day, they would square off and have a fight in that style that they were learning. And what they usually did is they would have both Jimmy and Doug learning, let's say, the same style, but maybe 2 different versions of it or 2 different schools of the same martial art, right? And so essentially it wasn't about them fighting each other at the end, or it wasn't about the 2 schools competing. It was like each episode almost had 2 stories. Like they would go to the country, and then you would follow kind of like Doug on his journey with his teacher, and then you would follow Jimmy on his journey with his teacher, and then at the end they would have their respective fights in those schools or whatever, and that was it. So it was almost like each episode kind of had two kind of story arcs within it, right? And so, which is both
sounds cool.
Which is a really great format, and but also has a little bit of inflexibility built into it, which I'll kind of get to a little bit later. So, by the way, it's so cool. Like since then, Jimmy Smith later became an announcer for Bellator, and then he even got hired by UFC And he was there for a year, and then they made a very stupid choice of getting rid of him when they went over to ESPN, I think. And he's great. I think Jimmy Smith is one of the best guys out there in terms of commentary for MMA, and not just because I met him during the show. Like he's really fantastic and really knows his stuff. And I think he also has a podcast, and he's really great.
I'm gonna check him out.
So it's cool to see how, like, you know, what he's done since then.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of I didn't know much about Doug. Just I'd seen him on the show, but
You probably seen him in Jersey. Randomly.
Well, I grew up in Jersey.
Here and there.
Not everyone from Jersey knows each other just because we're from Jersey, right? And so anyway, the story started like this. I got contacted by a production company here in New York, and they contacted me and basically said, you know, we're the production company for the TV show Fight Quest, and we're looking to do an episode on Wing Chun, and we would like to contact Sifu Leung Ting and have him be one of the trainers. And I guess through an internet search, they found out that I was like the local Leung Ting representative at that time. And so they contacted me, and then they wanted to come over to my school and you know, check it out and see what the Wing Chun looked like, and get kind of an idea and a feel for things.
This is 2008, so I can imagine they're seeing some wild.
All your
good
C-Hangs,
stuff.
all your
Yeah,
seniors,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
back in the old wild days of City Wing Chun,
the
right?
Wild Wild West.
Yeah, and so basically, you know, we made an appointment for them to come over and to take a look at the class. So I told them to come over, I think probably during one of my more advanced classes, because I wanted them to see, you know, I wanted them to see my senior students. And then, of course, I prepped my students. I said, hey, guys, you know, there's some TV producers coming from the TV show Fight Quest, which most of the students
Be
knew
on
at
your
that
best
time.
behavior.
And so I was like,
kick
we're not going to do like the normal class where, you know, we just start and have like a warm up and do some technical training. I'm like, we're just going to basically have a fight class, right? Because I want, you know, I want them to come in and I want them to see, you know, what Wing Chun looks like, right? So that's exactly what we did. So they came, I met with the producer. His name was, I don't remember his name, but let's just call him Charles, all right? And every time I talk about him, I'm going to talk about him like this, because he's one of those, like, producers, you know? Like, from
And he
New
didn't
York.
sound like that. You're just going to...
Something,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
it was a long time
Yeah.
ago. I don't know exactly what he sounded like, but in my mind's eye, his attitude was very like, the chin pretend, like, I'm a producer in New York, and I make TV, and I'm better than you, all right? I just want you to know this, right? And he had that very kind of, like, condescending, punchable face. Right?
Yeah, okay. Shout out to Charles.
Yeah, shout out to Charles, right? And his assistant, I think her name was Sandra. She was absolutely lovely.
Okay.
You know. But anyway, so they came over, and then we're sitting there, and I'm explaining to them a little bit about, you know, what Wing Chun is about and the background and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, and I have one of my assistants, most likely Mike Yan, kind of running the class a little bit while I'm talking to them. And we have them padded up, and they're doing like aggressive chi sao and go sao and lat sao and all this stuff, and then some fighting stuff. All right, guys, now we're gonna, you know, fight against like you know, kickers or whatever, and then they're doing like really aggressive kick
Wish I
defense
was there for this.
chucking each other around. And just like, you know, it was just nothing but carnage on the dance floor that night, right? And so they were very impressed, and so, you know, Charles was like, "Oh, I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
You know, I like what I see here, right? And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it, right?" And so I was like, I
Should
was
have
like,
just threw him right in. Right in the fire.
so
Oh, yeah? You want to try? Get in here.
no, he's one of them narrow neck guys. And so, so anyway, I sat and talked to them afterwards, and they wanted to get a little bit of structure for the show, because even though every show kind of had the same structure in terms of, like, you know, they're going to learn from two different guys, and then at the end they're going to have their fights and so on, but they tried to, or at least on paper,
They try to flip it a little.
they want to make every episode unique to the culture of the style that they're doing, right?
Okay.
Or at least that's what they made it sound like. All right. And so I told them, and if you watch the final episode, you will notice that the final fight is on a rooftop.
Yeah.
And that was my idea, because I told them, I said, look, in Hong Kong, back in the old days, when they would have challenge fights with each other, they would do it on the rooftop, because it was one of the few places, like Hong Kong's a very crowded place.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of the few places where you could go and have a scrap, and you don't have to worry about, like, the police catching you or whatever.
No
and mind
5-0.
you, most of these scraps at that time, these were between kids who went to high school with each other. And you do Wing Chun, I do Hong Kong. Let's go and let's, you know, they weren't like death matches between masters.
Yeah.
These were like, hey, let's have a friendly sparring match or whatever. And,
Unsanctioned, good
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
And they, you know, and they would have varying degrees of friendliness or unfriendliness, right? But, you know, these are not like epic battles that they've later been kind of turned into, right? But they happen on rooftops, these Hong Kong rooftops. And so there is definitely a feel and an aesthetic to that, right?
Okay.
And so I told them, I said, you know, what the final fight scenes should, or the final fights should be on rooftops in Hong Kong. And they were like, they totally ate it up. And I was like, great. So then they asked me a little bit more about the training and like kind of what we did. And so I came up with the idea. I said, look, I know that normally in every episode, and this is the part that I thought was a little strange, is that and this is what the producers never understood because they don't do martial arts, right? Is that it's kind of weird for, in a traditional martial arts school, for you to accept a student into your school and say, okay, we're going to train you over the next 3 days and teach you our style and kind of, you know, bring you into the family, even if it's just for the cameras, even if it's just on paper. And then at the end of 3 days, you're going to have to fight our guys. It's a little weird because it's kind of like a mixed loyalty thing, right? Because you have to imagine that Jimmy is at that time, I think, still competing MMA fighter. So this is not someone without martial arts skill or talent, right? So you can imagine whether it was karate or judo or anything. Like
You didn't have a problem with him not picking it up. It's
no,
just,
but the problem is, look, because he was already a professional fighter, he could have still beaten the crap out of most of the people that he fought, not using anything of what he learned for those 3 days.
because his instincts are on point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, is that really like a fair thing for the school? You know, and even if you try to limit him to just using karate or Wing Chun or whatever it's slightly weird, and I felt that there were ways around that to make the show more interesting. So I told them that instead of fighting the Wing Chun school at the end, because first of all, Wing Chun versus Wing Chun sparring is very strange, you know, because when you put gloves on and a helmet, and then you have two Wing Chun people going at it, and it's just going to be an orgy of chain punches flying at each other, because you can no longer use a lot of your tools, and it, especially when you're talking about someone who's only trained for a few days. But I thought, I have a way better idea. Wing Chun was traditionally designed to fight against other styles of martial arts, namely other styles of Kung Fu.
Okay.
So why doesn't Jimmy was to learn from the Leung Ting school, and Doug was going to learn from the other Sifu school, whom at that time we didn't know was going to be Kong Ji Kong Sifu, right? We were like, you know, why don't you have Doug learn from the Wing Chun Sifu for 3 days, and then we have Jimmy learn from the Wing Chun, from us for 3 days. And then at the end of the 3 days, they have to each have a number of challenge matches against exponents of other Kung Fu styles. So first of all, just for anyone who's grown up on Kung Fu movies, and I'm sorry, okay, maybe it was my idea, but it was pretty awesome.
It was pretty,
okay?
yeah.
Because imagine, like,
this.
Not to toot my own horn, but like that's the show I wanted to see, right? Take someone and teach them Wing Chun for 3 days.
Why it's been created.
And then put them against a Hong Kong practitioner, a Choi Lei Fut practitioner, or whatever type of practitioner, right? And then you can really see what people like to see is that
Bringing
kind
it
of
back to the old school, yeah.
Also that style versus style thing, which is such a part of the history of, you know, Wing Chun and the challenge fights in the 50s and 60s. Yes. It was always about Wing Chun versus the other styles. It wasn't about this incestuous Wing Chun versus Wing Chun kind of fighting, right?
Wing Chun got his name. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So I thought this is a much better and more accurate throwback to what Wing Chun actually was and what Wing Chun should be than just having them kind of fighting our own guys at the end of the episode in, you know, like I just thought it wouldn't be the fights would not be as entertaining, and I was right. And also it is kind of strange. I mean, imagine if take away any emotional attachment you have to Wing Chun. Imagine you are a karate instructor and you train one of these guys for 3 days, and that guy's a professional MMA fighter. And now you're going to put him up against one of your guys, and maybe he's just a better fighter in general than your guy is in karate, for example, right?
Okay.
So it can be a little weird, right? So you have this kind of mixed loyalty, like, you know, we're going to train you really good so you can beat up our own guys at the end of it, right? So I just felt like, that format maybe didn't quite work for Wing Chun. And then when I proposed this, let's fight the other Kung Fu guys.
They were all for it.
Charles was like, oh, that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was like, great. And as a matter of fact, when they left after they, first they watched my students, they were like all for it. And then I gave them those ideas. They were like, this is really great. We're really happy for it. They were actually, according to what they told me, going to go with that idea. And in fact, it went so far that at that night, I started to email back and forth with Sifu Leung Ting, and I have the emails.
Wow.
Sifu Leung Ting started to procure the other fighters from the other Kung Fu styles to be there for the final fight. And these people from the production company, they were CC'd on that stuff. So they knew, look, at the end of the 3 days, we're going to have it be like a Kung Fu showdown between these guys who just did Wing Chun for 3 days and the other styles, right? And like, again, not to toot my own horn, but that's a pretty awesome idea, right? So I'm like sitting there going like, yeah, this is going to be great.
Happening.
This is going to be great. And so I remember Sifu Leung Ting was, because he would always like CC me on all the emails and stuff. And he told me like, yeah, we can get some, various practitioners of, the other martial arts styles, maybe Hong Kong, Chole Fat, whatever. But he also said, I think at some point, I have to go back and double check the email, that he had someone from like the Fok Yun Gap style, which you ever saw the movie Fearless by Jet Li.
Okay.
Like that style about, that supposedly was created by him. There was like a lost track fist was like one of his signature styles. Like Sifu Leung Ting somehow managed to dig up some guy who used this style.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we can even have them fight like obscure Kung Fu styles, not just like the stuff you heard. And I'm just thinking like, this is going to be amazing. At the end of this, I think they contacted me at the beginning of the summer, and the episode was going to be shot like in August, towards the end of the summer. So there was like I remember that by the time they contacted us to the time we were going to shoot the episode, there was like a good 2 to 3 months of time in between. So there was time to prepare and time to get ready. Damn. Now, the other thing that Charles was talking about was that, that obviously because I'm the Wing Chun instructor here, that I would go to Hong Kong and be one of the trainers that would train Jimmy. And I was like, hey, great. I'm more than happy, for that. And I also knew that at the end, there might be a chance that they might also have to fight the Wing Chun guys, So I thought, always in the back of my mind, I thought, there's also a chance that I might
prep for that,
that I might have to fight, right?
Yeah,
and
okay.
So, I'm old now, okay? I'm old for a fighter, but this is 2008.
You're probably like in your
I was like, no, I was 31.
early.
I was 31. So
okay.
I was still like, okay.
Yeah. Scrappy.
Well,
Vibrant.
I wasn't 43. I'll put it to you that
Right.
way. Right? By the time you turn 40, stuff starts falling off, right? So anyway, I'm like, okay, I'm still like in the pocket to, maybe do this, right? So I went on my like personal Rocky montage, and I remember I used to use the Boss Rutan all-round workout, and
great workout.
It's a
by
great
the way.
workout, right?
Shout out to Boss Rutan.
Shout out to Boss Rutan,
my man.
And so I would do it like a few times a week, and then I did it a few times more, and I would alternate. One time I would do the workout using the MMA style moves, and then the next time I modified it and did Wing Chun moves, and then so I would just do it like 3, 4, 5 times a week, and on top of like heavy bag training and training with my students. So I was like on this.
You were prepped and ready.
Yeah, I was like on this like
just in
Rocky
case.
montage, right? The only thing that was missing was, chasing the chicken and having some guy, telling me, I want you to eat thunder and crap lightning, baby genius.
Where was he?
Yeah, I didn't have him. I was on my own, right?
Yeah.
And my student, Mike Yan, who's your Siheng, one of the seniors, he's now a stuntman, has done Sherlock Holmes and Avengers and all that stuff. He was, my number one guy at that time. So he was also training, he was getting ready, and he would come to Hong Kong with me as well. So, and he also a strong guy, good for like kind of ready to go. He wasn't like too crazy about, fighting. He is also much prettier than I am. But he was, he was ready to do it if he needed to, right? So,
he was the De La Hoya of the school, I guess.
Exactly, right? Very skillful, but also very pretty, right?
Very pretty. All right.
So anyway, I was preparing. I was in really, really great shape by the time we went to Hong Kong. Super excited about doing this Wing Chun episode with this idea of having this showdown between the other Kung Fu styles, right? And then we got to Hong Kong, and pretty much everything was different. Pretty much from the moment we got there.
The moment you landed.
Well, not the moment I landed,
it just
but
felt
say
weird.
No, it wasn't that. it was the moment we got to Sifu Langting's gym.
Okay.
And I met with the producer whom I had met with a few months earlier in my school.
Charles. Good old Charles.
Don't forget, he's a producer. I do TV and I'm better than you. Okay? I just want you to know that, right?
So he's hanging out with Lung Ting.
So, so he was like a little bit different than he was in New York. He was like super stressed out and
was he straight jet lag and all that?
No, but I kind of was like, okay, you know, when I saw him a few months earlier, we were just talking about a TV show, and now here he's in Hong Kong, and it was a very, very tight production because you have to shoot the whole thing in like 3 days. You know, so like because it's shot, it's a reality TV show, but it's done in real time. So you really have to do the shoot in 3 days, like the way it's done in the show. So we had to, like, you're on a schedule, and that third day you're going to have the fight. So everything needs to line up. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, you know, maybe he's just stressed out a little bit, you know. So I'm like, I'll go a little easy on him. But then we're having the conversation, and that the first night we were going to go to is it called? I think it's called Victoria Park on the Hong Kong Island side to shoot the opening demonstration. And we were there, we were ready to go, and then Charles is like, oh no, they can't be in it. And he points to me and to Mike Yan. And then we're like, you have to imagine, like when he was in New York, he's like, yeah, you can come, you could be one of the trainers, it'll be great. And mind you, like the Fight Quest didn't pay for me to go to Hong Kong. I came on my own dime. And here's the thing, if they told me early that I couldn't be in the episode at all, I still would have gone anyway. You know, because you know, just to like support and any excuse to go to Hong Kong is a good excuse, right? and so I would have gone anyway, right?
I gotta go to the dentist.
Yeah, but he specifically told me that, you know, we were to be in the episode, and I even told him that I had a student who was a stunt man. And he would also come, and he was like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. He was
came
all
out of
like,
left field.
He was all in Hong Kong, in New York, he was all, yeah, right? Or I said, yeah. Right?
Oh,
I always have
goodness.
to make my jaw protrude when I'm doing him, right? So, and then he was like, no, they can't be in it. And Sifu Leung-Tang is like, you know, what do you mean? Well, they're not Chinese.
Wow.
So, and the funny thing is, I don't know what about my face he didn't recognize from 2 months earlier, but I never looked Chinese at any moment when he saw me, right? And it wasn't an issue when I saw him earlier and when I gave him all these great ideas. And now suddenly they're in Hong Kong, like, no, the episode is in Hong Kong. Wow. It's going to be about Chinese people. We can't have it. Well, one of the guys who's in the episode is Jung Soo, one of my Seeings, and he's Korean. And then Sifu Leung-Ting made a joke, well, he's Korean, and literally the guy was like, oh, they're not going to know. Now I can, you know, you can imagine now because the guy still is a production company. I'm sure he's woke as hell and all about inclusion and stuff like that. But the guy was literally like, well, he won't know he's Korean. Who's gonna tell? He was literally like that. I'm sure now, like, you know, you could probably cancel his career now if you said something like that, right? But you know, this was said off and we were just like, all right, whatever, that's fine. I mean, I was salty because
that's a blow right there.
I had flown all the way there thinking I was going to be in it.
Yeah.
You know, had I gone
you punched the bag a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah, but look, okay, I mean, for me, okay, if it turned out, okay, I can't be in it, I wouldn't be like, oh, I wasted all that. When you do martial arts, you never feel like you wasted your training. I just felt that because it's just about expectations, right? And had I known 2 weeks earlier that I wasn't going to be in there, I still would have gone and I would have been prepared for it. But it was all like, and it was like from that moment on, it was just like, no, you can't be in it. And it was like, isn't it obvious? I didn't say you could be in it. And it was just kind of like, what? Sifu Leung-Ting was super upset. Yeah. Super. And I'll get to that later because that whole thing continued, right? So, you know, so he flat out said that, right? And then we're like, okay, but he wanted us to have a demonstration. And so, like, the night before the filming, we practiced the demonstration. And it's a demonstration. It's not a live fight, okay? Mm-hmm. Had the producer wanted us to just fight, we would have done something different. But he says, we want a demonstration where you show all the different Wing Chun skills. So we actually planned this amazing demonstration. So there was like Chi Sao, fighting demonstration. Sifu Leung-Ting even demonstrated the knives versus the pole with Sifu Yan Yu Weng. And
Yeah.
there was even like one of the guys in Hong Kong did the inch punch demonstration where he broke like a number of he held the tiles with one hand and broke them. It was like a really cool like classic kung fu demonstration. And Mike Yan and I were part of the demonstration, and we did Wing Chun versus other styles.
Okay.
And Mike Yan attacked me with boxing and kicking and all sorts of stuff. And because Mike Yan is a stuntman,
Yeah.
I can like throw
Selling
him and
it.
he can take the falls and you know, and he like went on the ground and I kicked him and all this stuff. It looked really gritty and dirty, it looked like something, a Wing Chun version of like the first James Bond, like Casino Royale. It was very like it was very rough. It looked really good. And the other demonstrations, you know, cool cheese out demonstrations.
Did you have the James Bond suit on?
And no. We were all in the classic uniform. But like, you know, there was a blindfolded cheese out demonstration, and we had it all planned out, and we shot it. And I have a video of it. I had someone record. Well, here's the thing.
Me,
it's on a digital cassette, and it's in a box somewhere in my house. I have to go through all that. I have it somewhere, and it also includes. We also filmed the final fight on Fight Quest, because what you saw in the final episode, in the final cut, was not actually what happened. I was on the next building, the next rooftop, which was higher. And I filmed the entire thing with my video camera.
What? Like
and
a drone shot. Okay.
What ended up being the episode was not what actually happened. And so, but I have to find it. It's somewhere.
Wow.
But the problem is I don't even know if I still have the camera to play it. I have to like get these little digital disc players or whatever, right? So anyway, like we planned this demonstration, and then we go to Victoria Park on the Hong Kong Island side.
Right.
And, you know, they set up everything. I mean, you know, it's a very professional shoot. And we come out and they want Sifu Leung Ting. And so we find out that the other Sifu is Sifu Kong Ji Keung, who's another Wing Chun Sifu in Hong Kong. And they wanted to have two different styles of Wing Chun, you know, which is, I mean, the joke is if you had teacher and student, it's usually already two different styles right there. But they had like, you know, Sifu Leung Ting style, and then they had Sifu Kong Ji Keung, who's a different style of Wing Chun, a slightly different emphasis.
Okay.
And so we're like, okay, you know, that's totally fine. But, you know, Charles, he's like, well, we got him because he's a Sifu, but Leung Ting is a grandmaster, so that's like different. And then we're like, no. Sifu Leung Ting is a Sifu. Like, he didn't understand, like, Grandmaster is something that, you know, first of all, I'm not really for the title of it, but you can be a Grandmaster within your own line or within a school or whatever, but that's not something you actually address someone as. And that's not the distinction between the Leung Ting gym and another gym. So when Jimmy, when they wanted Jimmy and Doug to come out and meet their teachers, they wanted Sifu Leung to introduce himself as Grandmaster Leung Ting. And he was like, no. because the thing is, even though that might be his position within his own association, a Chinese instructor doesn't call himself that. I mean, you have to imagine even Yip Man, who at that time was the head of the Wing Chun family in Hong Kong, because he was the guy who brought his line of Wing Chun there, would never introduce himself as Grandmaster Yip Man, all right? He would never say, oh, my name is Yip Man Zhong Si, or Yip Man Dai Sifu, or Yip Man Zheng Wu Yan Yip Man, right? Because you don't do that, right? In fact, you don't even introduce yourself as Sifu so-and-so in Chinese, because within Chinese culture, it's understood. Like, for example, if someone was a student of Yip Man and you were his friend and he was introducing you to his Sifu, he would be like, this is my Sifu Yip Man. Mm-hmm. And if you were Chinese, you would go, Yip Sifu, nice to meet you. You would understand that that's what you call him. He doesn't have to say, you know, he doesn't have to introduce himself as Sifu or call him that, right? In fact, do you ever see Yip Man's business card? Which is why I always have to laugh at a lot of these European self-titled grandmasters, especially my Hings who've broken away from the EWTO and they gave themselves these, they go, I am Grandmaster, I am Dai Sifu. Yip Man's business card just said Yip Man on it.
So cool.
With like his address. That was it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And
keep it simple.
You know, meanwhile, you know, Wolfgang Schniedelschnurz in Germany the demands on being called
all the titles
Dai
on
Sifu
it. Yeah.
Sigong Grandmaster or something like that. And it's just like
Sifu Grandmaster.
Exactly, right?
Right.
And so you know, so they wanted Sifu Leung Ting to introduce himself as Grandmaster. And he was like,
lost his shit.
He was like, no, I won't. He goes, no. I remember he got super angry and he was like, no self-respecting Chinese person would introduce himself as Grandmaster. And then Charles like, but I thought you're a grandmaster. And then it's like, so you imagine, like, it already started at the gym when he was like, the white guys can't be in it. And then it starts here, right? And then so we shoot the demonstration. And whereas our demonstration was very tight, perhaps a little bit overly coordinated, Sifu Kong Ji Kong, they didn't really have a demonstration, like a set demonstration lined up. So they were like, the director wanted them to show some stuff, and then he had his students doing like steps and punches, and like half of them were going this way, half of them were going this way. And Sifu Leung Ting had to like cut in and actually help his guys arrange it a little bit. So Sifu Kong Ji Kong needed, so it's like our demonstration was perhaps a little bit too polished, and their demonstration was like unpolished. But the problem was, it wasn't their fault or our fault. We just didn't really know what they wanted, right?
Okay.
Because they were very unclear.
They didn't make it too
like
clear. Yeah.
they wanted, it was like, Charles, I want to see fighting. I want it to be very rough, but also polished. But of course, like so it's like he is spoken from a guy who doesn't know anything about martial arts. Yeah. He wanted to see real fighting, but he also wanted to see some technicals. Like it wasn't very clear. So I remember he came up to me and he was like, he came up to me and he goes, I wasn't very impressed with the demonstration. And I just remember in that mind going like, I had never really dealt with, Hollywood or TV or anything like that, and going like, oh, this is what people are talking about these people who are so out of touch, but they're the ones that get the money to do the projects, and they have a real Dunning-Kruger effect of like, thinking that they know about stuff that they don't know about, right? And so this, like, the guy, let's say if you were writing a script about a TV producer being kind of like a jackass, and you wrote the guy exactly like Charles, the director would come back and be like, yo, you need to tone this down. This is too stereotypical and too over the top.
Wow.
Like, this guy was literally that guy. Like,
you need to rewrite this script.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. No one is that much of a dickhead, right? The Charleses.
Wait, this is a true story? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Sifu Leung Ting is getting pissed because of the whole Grandmaster introduction. And then Charles didn't like the demonstration. And the white boys can't be in the episode, right? And then I'm just going like, this isn't.
But you're making this Charles character too lovable right now when you do the impersonation.
Yeah, no. He was he was a real dick. The guy was. I mean, like, look, I don't work in the entertainment industry. I'm a kung fu instructor, and now hopefully maybe one day also a podcaster. All right. Okay. And this guy was. He was everything you don't like about the entertainment industry wrapped into one person. And just like the arrogance and the hubris and, the being out of touch, but thinking that he was super, super in touch. And like he was that guy, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was day one. We do the demonstration. And the next day, so I talked to Sifu Leung Ting after that. And he goes, I don't care what he says. You show up tomorrow for the shoot, and you'll be in the episode. And I was like, okay. He was like, you arranged it. He said you can be in it, and you are my student, and this is Hong Kong, blah, 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 blah. So we're like, all right. So we got there early in the morning. Mike Yan and I get to the Leung Ting gym early in the morning before the shoot. And then, the crew comes in, and Jimmy is there, Jimmy Smith. And the producer sees us, and he goes, no. They need to get out of here, right?
They need to get out of your gym, Leung Ting.
Right, and Sifu Leung Ting. So here's the thing, okay? Because a lot of people know that I left his association in 2011, and there were politics and all this kind of stuff. But one thing I will say about Sifu Leung Ting, he's not known as being a particularly compassionate person, all right? But in this moment, I wish I had recorded what he said, even if it was just audio.
Yeah.
Because he told Charles, he was like, Hong Kong is not a backwoods city in mainland China where there are only Chinese people who've never seen a Westerner. He goes, Hong Kong was a British colony, and there are a lot of expats and a lot of foreigners who live in Hong Kong and train Wing Chun and are just as much a part of the fabric of Hong Kong as the Chinese people who live there as well. And he goes, and I have taught Wing Chun all over the world to foreigners, and foreigners appreciate Wing Chun and Chinese culture. And I have many foreign students here in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And it's very ignorant of you to want to only show Chinese people as if somehow that is a representation of Hong Kong culture. Because Hong Kong culture is beyond only just the Chinese people there. I mean, you have a rich history of, good or bad of British colonialism there,
Yes.
and that is part of it, whether you like it or not. And there are people who have rearranged their entire lives to go to Hong Kong and learn from these masters, right? And so he was basically calling Charles out on his ignorance for the fact that, you think Hong Kong is, like a small city somewhere in China where no one knows anything. But you don't realize that that's not what it is. And then he started to scream at the top, like he was angry with Charles. And then I was like...
This is like as soon as he got into school, too.
This was right from the beginning. They had not even started shooting that day yet. And it's already starting like this. After the relatively disastrous first night of shooting, right? And then so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go out into the stairwell and wait while they deal with this, right?
Yeah.
And so Mike Yan and I go out, and Jimmy Smith is sitting out there in the stairwell waiting. And I felt really bad for him because it's like, all of this is kind of delaying shooting. He's showing he's a professional. He's there because he wants to shoot. He's there to do the shoot.
To do his thing,
and now he's
yeah.
got to kind of wait while the producer / director / Charles is there having an argument with one of the subjects of the TV show, right? And I'm sitting there and I felt kind of bad because I didn't want Jimmy to think like, I'm here because I want to get FaceTime and it's all about me. Like, I was the guy who arranged the show, and the guy told me to be in it, and then suddenly told me not to be in it, right? And here, Sifu Larrington was really going to bat for me,
Okay.
And I had, in the entire time I have known him, very rarely ever heard him stick up for someone else who wasn't himself that much, and it happened to be for me, and it was amazing. It was really amazing. And I have some, weird memories with him, but that really stands out as a time where he really, was on my side.
Now, up until that point, you haven't met Jimmy Smith just yet, right? You just met him.
I met him
there
the
in
night.
Hong-
No, I met him the night before and shook his hand
Got
at
it.
the opening demonstration
Got
and
it.
stuff. And that was also the funny thing too, is that people talk about reality TV, and everyone knows reality TV is scripted and that it follows a format, right?
Yeah.
But you don't know how scripted it is until you're on the set of one. Wow. Because to come back to the night before, while we were doing the demonstration, they were like feeding the lines to Jimmy and Doug. Like, okay, I want you to mention something about this. Okay, when you meet Sifu Larrington, I want you to say this. So everything's supposed to be spontaneous. Everything's supposed to be real and reality TV. But it's not. I mean, a fair amount of what they said was guided and was scripted.
Okay.
Right? And so that's nothing shocking. But I think that when you hear the words reality TV, and then you actually are on a reality TV show and you go like, whoa, like, and this was this wasn't even like Big Brother or The Bachelor, which are way, way, way bigger shows. This was like a smaller reality show on Discovery Channel.
Okay.
And this thing was scripted AF. You know what I mean? And you're just like, okay, so I have never mind the cane on the screen. Okay. All right. This is what we call mid-show maintenance. All right.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So, as many of you know, our podcast studio is still not finished. You see, we're still missing bits here. So it is under construction and still under maintenance as we speak. So anyway, like it was weird, like how scripted all this stuff was, right? And so I'm sitting out there and I feel really bad for Jimmy, and I'm just like, look, man, I'm sorry. Like, he's like, yeah, like he understood that there was some stuff going on. So anyway, basically, Mike Yan and I, we had to peace out, all right, in order to keep the peace, right? So we left. I think we went and had some really good dim sum.
Okay. Which is all
I think
there is in Hong Kong.
Yeah, we went out and trained or something like that. Yeah. And then they shot the that day's episode. And so I heard later from, some of my training partners, Hao Kuo, who is American training partner of mine, but he's Chinese, and he was in the episode. I mean, when you listen to him talk, he's American as hell, but he looks Chinese. So he can
no
be in
one
the
can
episode,
tell.
Right? Yeah, no one can tell. Well, I mean, he is Chinese, right? To be fair, but but it was very funny. Like,
no one can tell he's American.
Who could be on there and who couldn't, right?
Oh, man.
And the main sparring partner for Jimmy was a Korean guy, right? But according to Charles, it doesn't really matter, right? So anyway, like they shoot the episode, and I later found out that day, like, Charles was like, I want to shoot some sparring, okay? And then he's like, how long do you want us to spar? Oh, we'll just shoot for the next 4 hours. 4 hours of sparring? Okay, like what? Like, first of all, if you did if you did light sparring, okay, let's say you just did very technical, you'd 4 hours
intense.
is still quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And if you did anything harder than light, like 4 hours is a lot. Have you ever rolled jujitsu for 4 hours? It's
We've had some sparring.
those are like the high level guys who
classes
can do that, right?
for about an hour, and you feel like
I do
you
a 2 hour
wanna just
fighting
drop.
class, and if you have
Yeah.
conditioning and sparring and all sorts of, it's intense.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be wiped out at the end of that. He's like, well, let's just shoot sparring for the next 4 hours. Like, you get a spar for. So it just shows you kind of how out of touch he was, right?
You're out of touch.
Exactly. And then we found out, I believe on that day, and again, this is where, some of my memories are a little fuzzy. Did we find it out the night before, the day of? Like, I don't know. But at some point around this time, we found out that they were like, oh, we're not going to use that idea of you fighting the other Kung Fu styles. We're going to, they're just going to fight your Wing Chun guys at the end. And then it was like, because there was a problem with that. The Leung Ting Gym in Hong Kong had fighters that were like, that would go and fight in contests, like people who were ready to fight.
Yeah.
Because you can't just say like anybody who does Wing Chun, you have an accountant who shows up twice a week and is doing Wing Chun for fun. Oh, by the way, because you happen to train in our school, you're going to have to fight Jimmy Smith at the end of 3 days, right? It's not fair.
Wow, dude.
You would need like a fight team within the school.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, the Leung Ting Gym, they weren't competing. They didn't have a fight team. They had a very reputable fight team in the 70s and the early 80s, but they didn't really do that anymore.
Okay.
So, like my school, like many schools, most of the people who train in the traditional martial arts school,
regular everyday
people who are
Okay.
doing it as a hobby, right? And then suddenly you have to convince someone who's got like a 9-to-5 suit and tie job, who does Wing Chun for fun, comes to Wing Chun class 2-3 times a week. Oh, we're doing this funny show. By the way, because you do Wing Chun, you might have to fight this guy who's got cauliflower ear and has MMA fights, right? So it was like, but again, it was one of those things.
So crazy.
Had we known 2 months earlier, when the idea was still that they were going to fight other Kung Fu guys that we had been getting ready to fight, had they said, no, we need them to fight Wing Chun guys, we could have prepared some people. I think to be fair to Kong Chi Kung's school, I think maybe he did Sandao or kickboxing, or maybe he was sending his guys to fighting competition regularly. But the Leung Ting Gym had stopped doing that a very long time ago. Yeah. So he, to be fair, he probably had some guys who were a little bit more prepared from a conditioning perspective. Uh-huh. And, meanwhile, the only people who were prepared from a conditioning perspective were the non-Chinese people who went there. Because remember I told you earlier, at the back of my mind, I was like, maybe we might have to fight, which is why I was like, I want to go to Hong Kong in shape, right? And I even got Mike Yan to get in shape, which was not easy. And so we were like kind of prepared for that, right? And so suddenly on that day, it was like, no, they're just going to fight the Wing Chun guys. And then it was like, oh, crap. There's no one in the Hong Kong gym, because also there's another issue.
All the monkey wrenches.
Even if you have someone who's a good fighter, like my Sihing Jongsu, the Korean guy. Yeah. He's one of the best fighters in WT. The problem is he's 40 pounds lighter, 30 pounds lighter than Jimmy. So it's one thing if you just put them together in a street fight. It's another thing if you say, okay, we're going to put gloves on you and headgear, and now we're going to make it a fighting contest. And okay, our best fighter happens to be 30 pounds less than the guy who's got to fight.
Wow.
Once you make it fair with rules, then you got to make it fair with the people who are stacked up against each other, right? Yeah, and so you had either some guys in the Leung Ting Gym who, if you pushed them a little bit, they could have done it, but they were maybe a little bit scared. Mm-hmm. And then you had other people who were ready and we were not
Weren't-
Asian enough to be in the
No.
episode, which was funny because we had to wear like a helmet and a face cage, and the gag was, I have dark hair. You put a helmet on me, whatever. Like, just film
Yeah.
me from the back. No one's gonna know,
No one
right?
who would know?
And yeah, so there were ways to work around it, but like no.
Man.
And I also think at that point, because Charles had already, Sifu Leung-ting and Charles were butting heads since the very beginning. That Charles was at that point he was just going to say no to everything, right?
Everything
And
that
that
came
became the tone of the remaining few days, right?
man.
And so anyway, I think the second day they went and they shot, on those little rowboats, those sampans, and then they were like, let's have them do a training. So let's get out of the school and let's have them go on these little Chinese boats, and then we'll have Jungsu kick Jimmy and he'll fall in the water. Right? Because none of that stuff was spontaneous. It was scripted. Oh, let's kick him. And Jungsu gave him, I think, a roundhouse kick, not even a Wing Chun kick, and kicked him in the water. Because it was like, again, the promise at the very beginning when I talked to them is that this show is going to be an accurate depiction of Wing Chun, Hong Kong culture, and the way people trained over there. And it ends up just being a parody of Chinese stuff.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so it was like, oh, let's do something hokey and put them on boats. Like I saw that in a movie once type of thing, right? And so rather than actually having like a smart and intelligent build up to these fights, it was like they were doing all this hokey stuff. And I remember I got really salty about one thing. They went and taught Jimmy some Wing Chun long pole. And at that time in 2008, I had not even started learning the long pole from Sifu Leung-ting yet. And I was like so angry because I was like, dude, I'm an instructor in Sifu Leung-ting's organization.
Yeah.
I teach in New York. I have a big school, lots
Why
of
is
students.
he learning long
And
pole?
I can't
Yeah.
even learn the long pole yet. And then Jimmy, on day 2 is learning the long pole, which also like, I mean, I get it. They wanted to show something different, to have some variety in the episode. But what did learning long pole have to do with preparing him to fight on the final day, right? And so,
Dude.
so anyway, I remember that. I remember my Sihing Robin was like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll learn the long pole soon." And then I started learning the long pole the next
Like,
year.
okay.
Yeah, but still, I just remember like in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, does he get to learn long pole,
Had
right?
the water boiling and there's more salt in there.
Yeah, but
Okay.
again, it was kind of like, oh, let's go to some outdoor temple and do some long pole, and let's have them train on the sampan, and it was all this like hokey, stereotypical Asian nonsense, right? Like it wasn't an accurate depiction of Wing Chun training and Hong Kong culture, right? So and Sifu Leung-ting, I could tell he was really starting to lose his patience at this point. So he starts worrying about getting people to fight, because basically Jimmy's training with us for 3 days, and then at the end of the third day, he's going to have to fight one of our guys, which comes back to what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
From a culture perspective, it's a little weird. Like, oh, we've been nurturing you for 3 days, and now we're going to smack each other in the face, but not necessarily in a friendly way, in a kind of like, let's see what's what kind of thing, right? At best, they really should have had them. It should have been like, okay, well then have Jimmy fight just Kong Ji Kyung's guys and have Kong's guys fight Leung Ting's guys. But we couldn't do that because we didn't have any guys at the end, right? The few Chinese people we did have in the Leung Ting school, they didn't really want to do it, which is unfortunate. And it's a bit embarrassing, especially considering what their position was in the Leung Ting school. They could have done it, and they kind of... You ever see that meme with Homer Simpson?
Yeah, he just
where he kind of
backs
fades into the bush?
bushes,
Yeah, so a few of Sifu Leung-ting's
Ah.
assistants, younger guys who were fitter, they kind of went back there, right?
Leung-ting was probably salty about that too.
Sifu Jongsu, he was a bit undersized.
Yeah.
Although he was a very good fighter, but when you have he was a bit undersized to go up against Jimmy. And like I said, yeah, I mean,
What
even
was Jimmy's weight class?
I don't know, but I mean, Jimmy would at least be
Middleweight.
180 pounds or something like
okay,
that. Maybe a little
gotcha.
bit more. I don't know.
Like a super middle.
And I was 160 pounds. So even
Yeah.
if I were to fight him, I
You
would
were
still be
160 pounds
at
back
that
then?
time. Yeah, I would
Wow.
I would still be giving up weight, but like
Yeah.
I was a lot less worried about that. And Mike Yan, he was
He's
probably
like a
about
good-
190 pounds, right? Or
Yeah,
whatever.
right,
So we would
right.
have balanced it out this way here, right? So anyway, but they weren't having it. So Sifu Leung-ting was worried that, on that final day, we wouldn't have any fighters. So the idea was we need to get an Asian fighter who knows WT quick. And they were scrambling. Sifu Leung-ting was looking around, and I had someone here in New York City. So I had a student at that time.
Flew out of...
No. I had a student here in New York City who was Korean. Because again, according to Charles, it wouldn't really matter, right?
Yo.
So I had a student who was Korean, very tough guy.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, he had just graduated from the New York Police Academy. And he was tough and in shape.
I
right?
think I met this student.
And so I was like, I have an idea. Maybe that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Sifu Leung-ting was so desperate at this point to make sure that we had fighters there that he was like willing to fly him over. Now, Sifu Leung-ting he's a little tight with the pocketbook in terms of like, you know, he likes a deal and he doesn't like to give out money too much, right?
Calls for desperate measures.
But he was totally willing to like last minute
Wow.
fly this guy out from my student out from New York to Hong Kong so that we would have a real someone who could really challenge
Real
Jimmy,
fighter,
right?
okay.
Because my student wasn't only just a good fighter and a tough guy, but he had also had experience in boxing and so I mean he was someone who could handle himself. And so I remember like late at night getting texts from Sifu Leung-ting like, "Oh, what about your Korean student?" and like going back and forth and finally like on that second day it ended up that he just could not come to Hong Kong because he had just graduated from the New York Police Academy.
Okay.
He was just about to start and there was something like in the clause of his first contract with the NYPD, something like, or at least that's
travel.
at least that's what he told me about not fighting on TV or for money or something. I don't know. It's what he told me. I don't know if it was
That's
true.
interesting.
I have a feeling that maybe he was, you know, getting on a plane for 16 hours and then I think he was kind of like, it was a cost-benefit analysis for him, right? But he would have done great. It's just like, it was such a last-minute scramble. It was really grasping at straws at that point. So anyway, Sifu Leung-ting then decided that he was just going to
go fight himself.
No, he was going to pull the nuclear option, and he was just going to get this guy named Paul Cordy, who was a fighter, a Wing Chun fighter from. So he's an Italian guy from Australia. So when he spoke English, he had an Australian accent, but he was an Italian guy. He did Wing Chun at some point in Australia, and then he moved to Italy, and he was teaching Wing Chun over there. But he was from our line, from WT, and big guy. Tough guy, strong fighter.
Yeah.
And he would bring that guy over, and he would be the fight. So I think, but of course the problem was...
How did he get him to fight
Well,
if
the
he's
problem
not
was,
Asian?
well, that guy's also not Asian, right?
Yeah.
But I think what Sifu Leung-ting was hoping on is that it would be like kind of a last-minute Hail Mary thing, that on the day of, he would just say, "Hey, this is the guy I have to fight, take it or leave it."
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
Hardball.
That he would just finally do that, right? And that's exactly what he did. On that final day, he brings in Paul, you know, this Brock of an Italian Australian guy.
Same weight class.
And yeah, I mean, you know, much more comparable in size and experience to someone who should fight Jimmy.
Yeah.
And he brings him there on the night of, and Charles is like, no. And so we had the chance to have me or Mike Yan or Paul or maybe even my Korean student or someone else to fight. And at every way, it just was no, or it just didn't work out. And then so finally the night of, there was no one from the Leung-ting gym who can fight. And it was super embarrassing. But, and I know that Sifu Kong Chi Keung since then has taken that as a moral victory. Like, oh, they didn't have any fighters there or whatever. Not realizing, and to be fair to Sifu Kong Chi Keung, I don't think that he knew the backstory. That actually there were people there, but we just lacked a certain Asian gene to be on screen, right? And that it just they weren't letting it happen, and that had something to do with there being an acrimonious relationship between Charles and Sifu Leung-ting. So what ended up happening is on the final day, Jimmy had to fight Kong's students, and then Doug had to fight Kong's students. So only Kong's students fought on that final day. So, and then I have all the fights there. And I think because the producer didn't like Sifu Leung-ting, he wanted to make Jimmy lose one of his fights against Kong's guys. So I watched the fight, and they were all the same.
Fight.
No, I mean, look, it was all done in editing, right?
Yeah.
So you imagine that because of they killed Sifu Leung-ting's side in editing. And so the fights were all just an orgy of chain punches and nonsense, and you could see that Jimmy is holding back all the time. I mean, he's a professional fighter. He would have killed all these guys. And so, and then they were like, you know, and at the end of like, I think the third fight, because they each had 3 fights, I think, if my memory recalls.
Yeah.
And at the end of like the third fight, you know, they held up the hand from Kong Su. Oh, he won. And I remember Kong Su were jumping up like this was the biggest moral victory. Like somehow by proxy, by their fighter having beaten Jimmy in one of these 3 matches, they had also defeated the school of Leung Ting or whatever. And I felt that it was a little, they were going a little hard given like how Sifu Leung Ting was helping out Sifu Kong Chi Kung the first day on his demo. And like most of these guys, like, you know, I mean, Sifu Leung Ting, for better or worse, he's like the old school guy on the block. And it was kind of like let's tear down the old man kind of thing. And I've since, the reason why I know that Sifu Kong has said some of these things is, I've been to Hong Kong about 11 times since Fight Quest.
Yeah.
And I hear people who know him and say like, oh yeah, he said you guys didn't have any fighters, or he said they were afraid, or they this or that or whatever. And it was like, We had people, and the producers rejected every single one of them. Even the guy that we flew from Italy in the very last moment, right? And so that was unfortunately kind of what ended up happening, right? And I will try to dig up the original footage I have, because I have all those fights on video, and you could see, right? And so it was like it was not what it should have been. And the other thing that bothered me a little bit is that Sifu Kong Chi Kung had one student who was a TVB actor. And his name is Michael Tong. I think his name is, let me see, I have the note written down. Tong Man Leung. Tong Man Long. All right, something like that. And he's a TVB actor. Now, TVB is like, the major TV station, the major
like
TV network in Hong Kong. Yeah, it's like the novellas, right? But TV in Hong Kong is kind of like what TV was here in the, before the 80s. TV in Hong Kong is a massive step down from films, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember one time I was at a cafe in Hong Kong, and a bunch of TVB actresses came in, and they were like in the latest cool TV show. And I remember someone said like, oh, there's a bunch of TVB actresses there. And I remember like people just looking, they're like, oh. So I mean, like, in Hong Kong, like, your TVB actor or actress, not a big deal. But this guy was a student of, Kong Chi Kung. So he was like the celebrity guy there. And I always remember the first night back when we did the demo, he spoke English. Sifu Kong Chi Kung doesn't speak English. So he was like kind of the translator for Sifu Kong Chi Kung to Charles, right? And I remember at one moment when Sifu Leung Ting had walked away, that this Michael Tong guy, he's talking to Charles, and he goes, well, unlike their demonstration, our demonstration is unrehearsed. Because, like implying like, oh, they're such fighters, they can't even do a rehearsed demo because they keep it real, you know what I'm saying? Unlike us, or we're just there doing a bunch of hokey stuff or whatever, but we were doing what we thought they wanted, right? And then I remember when he said that, I was like, ugh. And then I remember, like, I told, some of my Hong Kong friends, they're like, oh, who cares what he says? He's just a TVB actor anyway, right? And so, and it was like, oh, I guess you're right? But I always felt like, everyone is, the thing about Hong Kong, it's all about respect when they're face to face, showing face or whatever. And the moment they walk away, oh, this guy, And I'll remember he literally waited until Sifu Leung Ting had walked 10 paces away, and then he was like, and then he said this stuff, and it's like, it's okay. He's a TVB actor.
It's okay.
So, yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of like, that's what ended up happening, right? Now, there's a whole kind of story of a little bit of aftermath about what happened after the episode, but that I'll tell that story. Well, I don't think that's an entire other episode's worth, but like I'll tell that story maybe
here and there.
Maybe on a day where we don't have a lot going on, or we don't have a lot to talk about. But that's essentially what happened. So the episode ended up being a hot mess. They really killed us in editing. And the producer, Charles, did make a concession. He said, well, I'll put him in the opening demonstration. So if you see the opening, there's like, you just see me do one chansao or something like that, or one kick or something. And it's very, very quick. What? And the funny thing is, I'm actually happy that I didn't get a lot of FaceTime in it, because the episode ended up...
shit show.
It was yes, exactly. Yeah. And so, but it is funny. The only notoriety, well, it hasn't brought me any notoriety, but the only time people ever recognize me from that show is if I already know them. And they're like, hey, did I see you in the Fight Quest thing? But no one's ever gone like, oh, I want to go to you because I saw you in Fight Quest, which I'm happy about.
Yeah.
Because that episode really ended up being a bunch of nothing. And my original idea, I think, was a lot better than what they ended up going with. And it was just so weird that he just... just decided like, no, all that stuff that we had agreed upon, and we had like emails back and forth about getting the other kung fu guys in there. Like, nah, forget that. We're not gonna do that. You know.
But the plus, I mean, the episode didn't turn out the right way. But what I understand is this is the trip you met your wife.
Yes. So I think part of the reason why I don't just, well, first of all, in hindsight, the whole story is kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's comedy in hindsight. While it was going on, it was grueling. It was just
yeah.
painful and awkward and weird. But in hindsight, it was funny. But that was the trip where I met my wife.
Yeah.
And of course, at that time, I was like trying to impress her. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be on a TV show on the Discovery Channel, right? And like, and she came that night, which is why she told me that guy was a TVB actor because she knew him. I'm like, I just thought that was just, the one guy in Kong school who could speak English, right?
Right.
And
she knew him.
Yeah, and I was all like, I'm going to be in a TV show.
You got
Check
to
me
impress.
out. I got to impress her, yeah. Good thing, that happened before the episode came out. They ended up barely in the episode at all, and none of that stuff even matters. So anyway, that is the the basic story. Now there's lots of little other things in there, whatever.
It has to be, yes.
But maybe I'll tell them like in pieces here and there. But that's for me. I wanted to really talk about what the original idea behind the episode was, and why it was such a letdown to what it became, right? And so, yeah, I guess like
I almost do not want to see this episode, but I still want to see it.
Oh, you haven't watched it?
Not yet.
Don't watch it. It's not worth it.
It's
You can definitely do it.
of-
I watched it
was
one
it, a
time
half
and then
hour?
I've seen it. No, it's an hour
It's
long.
an hour?
Yeah, with the
Ooh.
commercial breaks, maybe it's like 15 minutes
whole
long,
hour?
something like that.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of rough. It was cool to meet Jimmy, even if it was kind of brief.
Okay.
And it was an experience. I
Definitely
realized
a
just how
few
kind of
takeaways, yeah.
I definitely realized how gross and shady, producers are, and how like if you really want to do something. Like in Hollywood, you really want to be the person who's in control of it. Because the moment you have like, we have this great idea, but this production company is going to be in control of it, it's just a bunch of garbage. So anyway,
They
before
sold you a bag of shit with that
exactly. So before we get out of here, I just want to kind of ask you guys out there who are listening to us, what do you guys think about my original idea for the Fight Quest episode compared to what they actually did? If you guys are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and comment below. What did you think about my original idea about having them fight other Kung Fu stylists versus what they actually did? And if you're listening to an audio version of the podcast, go ahead and chime in on what you think about, what the idea was on YouTube. You can go over there because I think on the audio version of the podcast is nowhere to comment. But if you are listening to us on audio, please give us 5 stars and talk about how great it is because that actually
Awesome.
does help the algorithm with getting the podcast audio version out there. So we're now on iTunes, Android,
It's all about the
Spotify,
algorithm.
Amazon Music. And by the way, so right now, if you have an Amazon Alexa and you go, Alexa, play the Kung Fu Genius podcast,
Yeah.
she will
she'll
play
do
the
it.
Kung Fu
Yeah,
Genius
yeah.
podcast, right?
Awesome.
So anyway, also last thing before we get out of here, a bunch of people have been asking about my t-shirt. I apologize for you guys listening to us on audio. This is the famous City Wing Chun established 2002 gym shirt. People want to know if they were still available. We just got a brand new order of those. We have them available. I don't know for how long, but people are asking for these t-shirts all the time. You can get them at citywt.com, as well as a bunch of other stuff and lessons, online academy, theory classes, all that stuff is on there. So check out citywt.com. And a link for all that stuff is in the description below on the YouTube one. So, all right, peeps, that's all I got to say for now. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Watch out!
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be talking about the BAM!
How was that audio level? Was that a bit loud or was that good? It's just a little bit loud. I don't know why Dre went apeshit. Take it easy. There's a mic. We're in a room.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us about the real, unfiltered version of the Wing Chun Bam. Eric Bana. Shout out to the early Eric Bana. All right. Okay, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered unfiltered story behind the Wing Chun episode of Fight Quest. Oh no, don't post these.
Oh, I'm definitely posting these at the end.
Okay, peeps, on today's... Bah! Okay, peeps, on today's version of the best version of yourself. Shit, this shit is popping up over here. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us about that good shit. Going to tell us Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered story behind the Wing Chun episode of Fight Quest. Bastards!
He's getting so close.
Nonsense, lots of salt. Let's get to it. All right.
That was great.
Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real backstory. Backstory?
We're never going to start today. Unbelievable.
Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered story. What the f***? I said story the right way. I said it. The story behind the Wing Chun episode. Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered story behind the Wing Chun version. Wing Chun version? What the f*** is the Wing Chun version? Wing Chun episode of Fight Quest. Okay, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius is going to tell us the real, unfiltered story behind the Wing Chun episode of Fight Quest.
Oh, it's too early. It's f***ed him up. And that was probably the only one he would ever do correct.
I had it.
Let's be honest, you probably would have messed it up.
Okay, peeps,